Most people don't fail because they lack potential. They fail because they're distracted. If you can master focus between now and 2026, you won't just improve, you'll separate. Most people lose, not because they aren't gifted, not because they don't have opportunities, but because they are distracted by things that don't move them forward. If you want to win in 2026, you don't need more friends, more opinions, or more motivation. You need focus. Focus means saying no to what feels good so you can say yes to what pays later. Let me tell you something most people won't tell you. Nobody is coming to save you. And that's not bad news, that's power, because the moment you stop waiting for validation, you start building value. When you focus on yourself, you develop skills. When you develop skills, you create leverage. And leverage is what separates dreamers from winners. See, winners don't announce their grind. They disappear, they build, they sharpen, they sacrifice. And when they reappear, people call it luck. But it wasn't luck. It was discipline when nobody was watching. You don't need to prove anything to anyone right now. You need to prepare. Preparation is lonely. Preparation is boring. Preparation doesn't get likes, but preparation pays. Delayed gratification is the tax you pay today for freedom tomorrow. If you keep choosing comfort, you'll keep renting your future. But if you choose discipline, you'll own your life. Your income will never rise above your identity. Your results will never outgrow your habits. So if you want different results in 2026, you must become a different person before 2026 arrives. Not louder, not busier, not more visible, more focused. Consistency beats intensity. Do the right thing daily, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, because feelings don't build empires. Decisions do. 2026 is not a wish, it's a deadline. Every distraction is stealing from that deadline. Every excuse is charging interest on regret. So lock in, study, build, train your mind, strengthen your discipline. Focus on yourself until you win. And when you do, don't explain it. Let your results speak. Isolation before elevation is not punishment, it is preparation. Every meaningful rise in life is preceded by a season where you are unseen, unheard, and often misunderstood. This is the phase most people try to escape, but it is the phase that creates winners. Isolation is where clarity is formed. When the noise fades, you finally hear your own thoughts. You begin to recognize which desires are truly yours and which ones were planted by comparison, pressure, or the expectations of others. Elevation without isolation creates fragile success, loud, unstable, and short-lived. But isolation builds roots, and roots decide how high you can grow. When you isolate with intention, you remove distractions that drain your energy. You stop explaining yourself. You stop performing for approval. You stop negotiating with your potential. This is where discipline is forged, not because someone is watching, but because you decided your future matters more than your comfort. Isolation is not loneliness, it is alignment. It is choosing growth over entertainment, mastery over attention, and purpose over popularity. While others are busy being visible, you are busy becoming valuable. In isolation, your weaknesses become impossible to hide. There is no audience to impress, no applause to mask the gaps. This can feel uncomfortable, even painful, but discomfort is information. It shows you where the work is. This is where skills are sharpened, habits are rebuilt, and character is refined. You learn to sit with boredom, push through resistance, and execute without emotional motivation. These are not glamorous traits, but they are rare, and rarity creates leverage. Isolation also teaches patience. You stop rushing outcomes because you are focused on process. You understand that elevation is not something you chase. It is something that follows competence. While the world celebrates quick wins, isolation trains you for lasting results. You begin to think long-term. You trade short-term pleasure for long-term freedom. You stop asking how fast and start asking how solid. Many people fear isolation because it exposes them to silence. But silence is powerful. In silence, excuses lose their strength. In silence, responsibility becomes unavoidable. And responsibility is the foundation of leadership. You cannot lead others if you cannot lead yourself. Isolation is leadership training in private. It prepares you to handle success without losing yourself when attention finally arrives. Elevation attracts pressure, visibility, and demand. Without isolation, that pressure will break you. With isolation, it will reveal you. What you build in private is what holds you public. The confidence you gain from isolation is quiet but unshakable. You no longer need validation because you know the work has been done. You move differently. You speak less. You act with certainty. Isolation before elevation is not about disappearing forever. It is about disappearing long enough to become undeniable. When elevation comes, people will ask where you came from. They won't see the hours, the discipline, the sacrifice, or the silence. They will only see the result, and that is the reward. Self-mastery over external validation is the moment you stop living as a reflection of other people's opinions and start living as a product of your own discipline. Most people are unconsciously controlled by approval. They move when they are praised, hesitate when they are criticized, and stall when no one is watching. That kind of life is fragile because it hands your emotional authority to the crowd. Self-mastery begins when you take that authority back. You stop asking, do T, hey, like this, and start asking, does this move me forward? External validation is addictive because it feels like progress without requiring growth. Likes, compliments, applause, and recognition trigger comfort, but comfort does not produce competence. When validation becomes your fuel, your performance depends on mood, attention, and feedback. Self-mastery replaces that dependency with standards. Standards do not change when the room changes. Standards do not disappear when the applause stops. Standards hold you accountable even in silence. The discipline of self-mastery is built in private decisions. It is choosing to do the work when there is no audience, no reward, and no immediate payoff. It is training your mind to act based on commitment instead of emotion. Emotions are temporary. Commitment is structural. When you master yourself, you don't negotiate with resistance, you move through it. You don't wait to feel ready, you execute because readiness is a byproduct of repetitio. Self-mastery also requires emotional control. When you are ruled by external validation, your confidence rises and falls based on reactions you cannot control. One compliment can inflate you, one criticism can derail you. Mastery stabilizes you. You learn to observe feedback without becoming it. You extract what is useful and discard what is noise. This allows you to improve without losing identity. Growth becomes intentional, not reactive. There is also a cost to validation that most people ignore. It dilutes authenticity. When approval becomes the goal, you begin to perform instead of build. You shape your actions around what will be accepted instead of what is effective. Over time, this creates a gap between who you are and who you present. That gap produces anxiety, inconsistency, and burnout. Self-mastery closes that gap. You become aligned. What you believe, what you do, and what you say begin to match. Mastering yourself means mastering habits. Habits decide outcomes long before motivation enters the picture. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. External validation cannot sustain systems. Only identity can. When your identity is rooted in discipline, you act in alignment even when results are slow. You trust the process because you trust yourself. As self-mastery increases, dependence on approval fades. You no longer need to announce your progress. You no longer chase recognition. You become internally referenced. Progress becomes its own reward. This is where confidence becomes quiet but powerful. You are not easily shaken because your worth is not outsourced. You know who you are because you have proven it to yourself through consistent action. The paradox is that when you stop chasing validation, you often receive more respect. Not because you seek it, but because mastery is recognizable. People respond to certainty, consistency, and discipline. They trust those who are not swayed by opinion. Self-master creates gravity. It draws opportunity without desperation. Choosing self-mastery over external validation is choosing freedom. It is deciding that your life will not be dictated by applause or criticism. It is committing to become the kind of person who follows through regardless of who is watching. And once you master yourself, no audience can control you and no silence can stop you. Delayed gratification creates dominance because it separates those who want comfort now from those who want control later. Most people are ruled by urgency. They chase quick pleasure, fast rewards, and immediate relief, not realizing that every shortcut weakens their future position. Dominance is never accidental. It is built by individuals who are willing to wait, willing to sacrifice, and willing to endure temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term power. The ability to delay gratification is not about denial, it is about direction. When you delay gratification, you are making a strategic DCs. Ion about time. You understand that time is either spent or invested, never saved. Immediate pleasure spends time. Discipline invests it. The dominant person consistently chooses investments. While others consume, they compound. While others seek entertainment, they seek execution. This is how small advantages stack into overwhelming leverage over time. Delayed gratification rewires your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who reacts and start seeing yourself as someone who decides. You don't ask what feels good right now, you ask what pays later. This shift changes behavior at the root level. You train yourself to tolerate boredom, resist impulse, and move without emotional reward. These traits are rare, and rarity creates advantage. When most people quit, you continue. When most people slow down, you stay consistent. Over time, this gap widens until dominance is inevitable. There is also a psychological edge created by delayed gratification. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your self-trust increases. Confidence stops being a feeling and becomes evidence-based. You know you will do the work because you have done it before without external pressure. This inner certainty makes you dangerous in competitive environments. You are not dependent on motivation. You are not derailed by discomfort. You are anchored in discipline. Delayed gratification also protects you from the illusion of progress. Many people mistake activity for achievement. They feel productive because they are busy, visible, or praised, but their position does not change. Delayed gratification forces you to focus on outcomes instead of optics. You prioritize actions that move the needle, even if they are invisible and unrewarded in the short term. This builds real equity, skills, assets, systems, and reputation that cannot be taken away. Dominance requires patience because mastery takes time. You cannot rush competence. You cannot shortcut character. Delayed gratification allows you to stay committed through the slow phase, the phase where nothing seems to be happening. This is where most people quit, not because they failed, but because results were delayed. Those who understand the process remain calm. They know the harvest follows, the planting, not the intention. As delayed gratification compounds, your options expand to gain freedom of choice. You are no longer forced to say yes out of desperation. You can negotiate, select, and position yourself strategically. This is true dominance, not control over others, but control over your circumstances. It comes from years of choosing discipline over distraction. The irony is that delayed gratification eventually produces faster results. Once momentum is built, progress accelerates. What took years to build can outperform what others chase for decades. From the outside, it looks sudden. From the inside, it feels earned. Delayed gratification creates dominance because it builds a person who cannot be manipulated by impulse, pressure, or comfort. It creates someone who plays the long game while others exhaust themselves in short sprints. And in the long run, discipline always outpaces desire. Identity determines income and impact because your results are not driven by what you want, but by who you believe you are. Every action you take flows from identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you act in alignment with your self-image. If your identity is small, inconsistent, or externally defined, your income and influence will reflect that limitation. But when identity is clear, disciplined, and internally anchored, results begin to scale naturally. Most people try to change outcomes without changing identity. They chase strategies, opportunities, and tactics, hoping for different results while operating from the same internal framework. This creates frustration because behavior always obeys belief. If you see yourself as someone who hesitates, you will hesitate. If you see yourself as someone who finishes, you will finish. Identity is the operating system that determines what actions feel natural and what actions feel impossible. Income is a mirror of value creation, and value creation is tied to identity. You are paid in proportion to the problems you believe you are capable of solving. If your identity limits you to small problems, your income remains capped. As your identity expands, so does your willingness to take responsibility for larger challenges. Responsibility is the gateway to higher income and greater impact. People who avoid responsibility also avoid growth, even if they don't realize it. Impact follows the same principle. You cannot influence at a level you do not identify with. Influence requires conviction, and conviction comes from alignment between who you are and what you do. When identity is fragmented, communication is weak. When identity is integrated, presence becomes powerful. People sense certainty. They trust consistency. They respond to clarity. Identity shapes not only what you say, but how it is received. Identity is formed through repeated behavior, not declarations. You don't become disciplined by saying you are disciplined. You become disciplined by doing disciplined actions until they become normal. Over time, habits solidify identity. Once identity shifts, behavior no longer feels forced. It feels like expression. This is why lasting success feels effortless to those who have built the right identity. It aligns with who they have trained themselves to be. A weak identity seeks permission. A strong identity sets standards. When your standards rise, your decisions change. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop tolerating environments that dilute your potential. You begin to curate your inputs, protect your time, and demand more from yourself. These decisions compound into higher performance, which then compounds into higher income and broader impact. Identity also determines how you respond to pressure. Pressure does not create character, it reveals it. Under stress, people revert to identity. If your identity is rooted in discipline and growth, pressure sharpens you. If it is rooted in comfort and approval, pressure breaks you. The higher the level of income and impact you seek, the stronger your identity must be to sustain it. When identity evolves, opportunities appear, not because the world changed, but because your perception did. You notice problems others ignore. You speak with authority instead of hesitation. You move with intention instead of urgency. This attracts trust, partnerships, and leadership roles. People don't follow potential, they follow identity made visible through consistent action. Identity determines income and impact because it governs how you think, how you act, and how long you persist. Change who you see in the mirror, and the numbers will follow. Not instantly, but inevitably. Consistency compounds faster than talent because talent without discipline, unreliable, while consistency creates momentum that cannot be stopped. Talent may give someone a head start, but it does not guarantee direction or durability. Consistency, on the other hand, builds structure. It turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results through repetition over time. What looks small in the beginning becomes overwhelming in the long run, and that is where consistent people separate themselves from the rest. Most people overestimate talent and underestimate repetition. They admire skill without acknowledging the thousands of unglamorous actions that created it. Consistency is what turns learning into mastery. Each repetition removes friction, sharpens judgment, and increases efficiency. Over time, what once required effort becomes instinct. This is how consistency creates speed. Not through intensity, but through familiarity and precision. Talent often depends on mood and confidence. On good days, it performs well. On bad days, it disappears. Consistency does not negotiate with emotion. It operates on commitment. This makes it dependable. In environments where pressure is high and outcomes matter, dependability wins. The person who shows up every day, executes the basics, and improves incrementally will outperform the talented person who relies on bursts of inspiration. Consistency compounds because it builds trust. Self-trust comes first. When you repeatedly do what you said you would do, your confidence becomes grounded in evidence. You stop questioning whether you will follow through. This reduces hesitation and decision fatigue. Others begin to trust you as well. In business, leadership, and influence, trust is currency. Consistency earns it quietly and steadily. Another advantage of consistency is that it creates feedback loops. Daily action produces daily data. You see what works, what doesn't, and where adjustments are needed. Talent without consistent application never gathers enough data to evolve. Consistency accelerates learning. Mistakes become instruction instead of setbacks. Progress becomes inevitable because you are always in motion. Consistency also protects you from comparison. When you are locked into a daily process, you are less concerned with who is ahead or behind. You are focused on execution. This mental clarity preserves energy. Instead of wasting attention on external benchmarks, you invest it into refinement. Over time, this internal focus leads to exponential improvement. Talent can open doors, but consistency keeps them open. Many people start strong and fade because they lack structure. Consistent individuals may start slower, but they finish stronger. They develop resilience because they have trained themselves to continue regardless of circumstances. When obstacles appear, they adapt instead of stopping. This persistence compounds into advantage. As consistency builds, results begin to stack. Small daily actions create measurable progress. Progress creates motivation, not the other W, A around. This creates a self-sustaining cycle. The more consistent you are, the easier it becomes to remain consistent. Eventually, what once required effort becomes identity. You don't try to be consistent, you are consistent. In the long run, talent that is not reinforced by discipline becomes irrelevant. Consistency, however, continues to compound. It widens the gap slowly at first, then all at once. What others dismiss as ordinary becomes extraordinary through time. That is why consistency compounds faster than talent. It never stops working. 2026 is not a hope, it is a deadline, and the difference between those two words determines how you live today. Hope is passive. It waits. It assumes time will be kind, circumstances will improve, and motivation will appear. A deadline is different. A deadline creates urgency, structure, and consequence. When you treat 2026 like a hope, you drift. When you treat it like a deadline, you decide. And decisions change trajectories. Time does know. Respond to intention. It responds to action. Every day that passes is either moving you closer to leverage or locking in limitation. A deadline forces you to measure progress honestly. It removes fantasy. You stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, what must be done now for the future I'm targeting? This shift eliminates excuses because deadlines do not negotiate. They arrive whether you are ready or not. When 2026 becomes a deadline, clarity increases. You begin to see distractions for what they are, thieves of momentum. Activities that once felt harmless suddenly feel expensive. You become selective with your time, your energy, and your attention. You stop overcommitting, you stop postponing difficult decisions. You understand that delay is a decision with consequences, and most people are unconsciously deciding against their future every day. A deadline also creates pressure, but pressure is not the enemy. Unfocused pressure breaks people. Focused pressure builds them. When you know the clock is running, you prioritize execution over perfection. You take action sooner. You adjust faster. You learn in real time instead of waiting for ideal conditions. Progress accelerates because you are no longer trying to feel ready. You are trying to be effective. Treating 2026 as a deadline changes how you relate to comfort. Comfort becomes suspicious. You begin to question routines that do not produce results. You recognize that growth requires friction, and friction requires effort. A deadline forces you to confront the gap between who you are and who you need to become. That gap can feel uncomfortable, but it is also instructive. It tells you exactly where the work is. Most people underestimate how fast time compounds. Small wasted days accumulate into years of regret. Small disciplined days accumulate into irreversible advantage. A deadline makes this visible. It turns abstract time into concrete urgency. You stop living as if you have unlimited chances and start acting as if each season matters, because it does. When 2026 is a deadline, accountability becomes internal. You stop blaming circumstances, people, or timing. You take ownership because ownership is the only thing that produces control. You begin to track habits, outputs, and results. You ask harder questions of yourself, not to punish yourself, but to position yourself. Deadlines reward honesty. The people who win in 2026 will not be the most hopeful. They will be the most disciplined. They will be the ones who treated the future as something to be built, not wished for. They understood that urgency today creates options tomorrow. While others waited for clarity, they moved. While others hesitated, they executed. While others hoped, they prepared. 2026 will arrive no matter what you do. The only question is whether it will expose you or reward you. That answer is being written now in daily decisions that feel small but are not. When you stop hoping and start treating time like a deadline, your behavior changes. And when behavior changes consistently, outcomes follow. The truth is simple. Nothing changes until you do. Focus is not a phase, it is a decision. Isolation sharpens you. Self-mastery stabilizes you. Delayed gratification strengthens you. Identity expands you. Consistency separates you. And deadlines force you to move. These are not ideas meant to inspire you for a moment. They are principles meant to govern your life. You do not need permission to commit to your future. You do not need validation to stay disciplined. You only need the courage to stay focused when results are delayed and the discipline to keep showing up when no one is watching. That is how quiet effort turns into undeniable outcomes. 2026 is coming, whether you are ready or not. When it arrives, let it find you prepared, not hopeful. Let it meet someone, who chose focus over distraction, discipline over comfort, and long-term victory over short-term pleasure. If you do that, you won't need to announce that you've won. Your results will speak for you.